My name is Dr. Chris Brooks. Today, I lead the first Black-owned venture capital firm in the state of Minnesota. So Brown Venture Group is an organization, a business that we started in June of 2018. We started the business really based on some specific data points, and those data points were that women and people of color were, pretty much locked out of venture capital in America altogether. Women, 1/2 of the population of America, were receiving less than 1% of venture capital investment. Black folks as a category, less than 1%. Latinx folks as a category, less than 1%. And the indigenous population in America, the Native American folks, they weren't even on the radar screen. We couldn't even find good data to figure out what are they receiving, are they receiving. One of the things we learned is that the indigenous communities, one of the reasons they're not really on the radar screen is because they don't trust the American economic system that has taken advantage of them for centuries and centuries. So as we built our firm, we deeply engaged all of those communities that had been sort of ignored. We continued to build out our thesis and our investment framework around that. Venture capital is part of the financial services industry, specifically the investment component of the financial services industry that makes investments into companies for an exchange of equity or stocks or shares. Venture capital has a little bit of a higher risk profile, right? We're investing in some things often that are unproven, companies that have not succeeded. When you make an investment in 3M or Target or Coca-Cola, you're investing in a company that has, decades of revenue that you can verify and a very robust and well-developed executive team, business plan, 10 to 20 to sometimes 50-year strategy. Venture capital invests at the very, very early stages of business. So we invest all the way from what we call friends and family rounds of investments, which are the very earliest stages of an entrepreneurial journey and business maturation, to what's called Series A, which is still fairly early, but by the time a company gets to Series A, they usually have revenue or they have protected IP or some other characteristics that justify the investment. And so that's the space that Brown Venture Group plays in. We only invest in Black, Latinx, and Indigenous entrepreneurs that have technology-centric ideas. I think it would be fair to describe our investment model as disruptive. And I know that word can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Sometimes there's negative disruption where things get, messed up for no good reason, or it's sort of like pathological. We think of our model as positive disruption, right? We are creating access to transformational capital for entrepreneurs who, when given that capital, build out some of the most amazing, remarkable, successful companies on planet Earth. One data point that we centered down on as we developed our thesis was that at the time in 2018, and this may still be true in 2023, the most educated, investment-ready group of Americans were Black women. No questions asked, no debate. The data was extremely clear. And at the time in 2018, Black women were receiving something like 0.0006% of investment. We think about that in terms of that not being a business decision, because if you're a business person, you would say the most investable, investment-ready group of folks, let's get them the capital. So it wasn't a business decision, it was a bias decision. As we've launched our fund, as we've gotten our message out into the marketplace, we've actually gotten a very great reception from most folks. It's not difficult to look at the data and understand that this is a huge opportunity. Undervalued assets with huge upside, strategic investment at the right times, in the right amounts. We can create some really interesting value and potentially even brand new economies of scale. The one place we have not gotten great feedback, or where we've had a little bit of challenge, is with the deeply entrenched systems that actually don't want people of color and women to succeed, right? Those are the most challenging environments. No matter what the DEI or ESG statement says, there are still places in America where people of color and women are not welcome to be leaders, board members, and those are very, very difficult places for firms and funds like ours to get traction and to have success. What has traditionally happened in America is that folks that are from outside of communities of color come up with ideas, want to implement those ideas, and when those ideas are fully baked, they bring them to communities of color and say, let's implement our idea. At Brown Venture Group, we believe that it's best to do things with communities of color, not for communities of color. When you do something for communities of color, that's a project. Projects get cut. When you do something with communities of color, that's a partnership. Partnerships get investment. Friends change the world together. So we think that if we can bring folks together who traditionally have not been able to work closely together, if we can build strong relationships, always with the expectation that people of color and women will be in central leadership roles, people of color and women will get significant investment, people of color and women will be centered as sort of like the reason why those projects exist. We'll have completely different processes, we'll have a completely different constellation of relationships, and ultimately we'll realize completely different outcomes that will be way, way better and way, way more profitable. Because the other thing that the entire nation agrees on from a data perspective is that diverse teams significantly outperform non-diverse teams. So if we can just get to that destination where diverse teams and people of color and women in leadership are the norm, America will be a different place, a much better place. I think it's critical to just think through outcomes before we plan stuff, right? Often we get really excited about our ideas, our conferences, all of these things that are just activities or outputs. What are the outcomes we seek? The outcomes we should seek should be proper investment into women and people of color, economic improvement in the conditions of women and people of color, and more broadly, a much more robust and human-centered Twin Cities metro area, United States of America, world. We have to think really, really critically about the outcomes and then reverse engineer the things that we're building toward the outcomes. You know, these investment opportunities that we invest in at Brown Venture Group, from a biblical perspective, they represent new wine. And we can't put that new wine in old wineskins. They will burst the wineskins. Brown Venture Group is a new wineskin. We're going after new wine. This is the way that things are supposed to work. This is the way that innovation and disruption and growth and progress are supposed to work. So my admonition would be give some critical thinking, of course, to your business practices, to your leadership structures, to how inclusive or non-inclusive your organization and or your leadership structures are. But ultimately, you've got to get beyond the thought process and the thought activity and get to actual action. And the actual action needs to be held accountable by some sort of scorecard or accountability measures, so that when you're done with the work, you can point to it and say, we achieved something that's measurable.